Strength of America podcast.
All right. Welcome to episode 27 of the Strength of America podcast. Bob Davis.
Bobby Davis.
All right. We're trying this the second time. Unfortunately, Bob had some issues the first time and forgot to hit record on the video. Bobby says, I got nails in my tire. I've got to work on that. So what you do? Got to get some sleep. All right. What we want to talk to you about today is about our next progression and moving in for summer conditioning. And a big part of that are the weights. And there's always issues on, can kids lift? What are they doing? And right now we want to talk about the progressions of the squat. Squat's one of the basic lifts that we all need to be taking part in. And that's our younger ones up through our college and professional athletes that are doing it. But how they do it, how often, how do you progress? How do you get them to that point? You don't just walk in and load them up with a bar, but getting those body positions. So we're going to show you things with the weights and things that we're going into, and then talk also about what do you do with your 10-year-old athlete at the same time. So what are some key things you look for? We go right into the thing with the squats or with the weights, or do we work on mobility or flexibility to see if they can actually squat first? What do you normally do?
A lot of the times when we do our movement prior to the weights, anyways, in the summer, we have our movement, whether it's weight or speed and agility or core conditioning or some of our power development stuff, we'll do just body weight and different things like that. A lot of time we'll get to see them in a squat pattern or a squat jump pattern. So we can already tell if they have an issue going on to where knees are rolling in, their posture, they don't understand how to organize posture through different positions. So there's a first step we can kind of see and get an idea before we even step in the weight room. As we go through, a lot of times when we get them into the movement aspect of it all, we can start working on some of the body weight stuff, how to organize them. So when we get in the weight room, a lot of things that we can start to do is work on some of that mobility. And I found out when I have about 40 kids or so, like I've had with spring football and some different things like that, you have to start to get a little more creative with your warm-ups and what you got going on. And it really allowed us an opportunity to have in our warm-ups to have stations. And those stations, we've had different things where we'll work on a squat where they're going up to a wall that's very tall. They'll work on staying upright as they squat. They can't run their knees or their upper body into the wall. They have to learn how to externally rotate at the hips and open up there a little bit. We've also done things like a plate press out as they squat. So we can go into a tempo. They can press a plate out. As they press a plate out in front of them, it gives them a counterbalance. So it allows them to sit back because that weight's out in front of them. So it feels very natural. It feels very comfortable. It gets them right in the position. We've also done things like a dead bug or some different things that start to get the core a little turned on there. And a lot of that is just getting these athletes to, by the time they step under the barbell, or maybe if they're younger, they're real rough, or we just want to get some reps and some good teaching time, we'll throw a dumbbell up for a goblet squat or a sandbag or anything, or any implement of that. But by the time we do that, after we do the warm-up, it allows me to see a little bit more. It allows me to kind of see, where do I want to put this freshman, or where do I want to put this upperclassman? It starts to let me organize what we're going to do for that day. So also it allows them to start already getting a little bit of work and starting to open up before we get in the squat. Because if they're super tight, if we can loosen them up a little bit, kind of get some things turned on so they're moving a little bit better, it's going to help a ton.
Well, I think a big part, it's great with, Bobby's talking about how that, are the body ready to handle it and where they're at and moving. Years ago, I know we started in this field, actually, I hate to say it's 40 years ago, high school stuff going on in the weight room. And we still see it today. Frustrating is if an athlete has problems where we talk about mobility and those Achilles tendons are so tight, and as they squat, those heels came up every time. The traditional thing that was done all the time is they just put a weight plate underneath them, a 10-pound plate or something, so that their heels were up. It allowed them to keep that balance and squat instead of going forward. Except what it did is they kept that position, kept loading weight heavier and heavier, gaining strength, but never got the mobility in the ankle. So now what are you doing? You're setting your athlete up for disaster on that Achilles tendon. They'd make a hard plant. They're exploding against somebody. Now they've got that much more strength and power in that calf and that Achilles, but they're less flexible because they've never really worked that mobility and movement. That's when they tear and blow these things out all the time. So it's so important that we find out, and this is whether our kids have never done weights, we're checking to see this, and we get kids from other schools that come to our summer camps that say, oh yeah, I squat 350 or I do this. Well, great, let's see how you squat and how you're moving. And if they're adjusting so that their knees are rolling in, things are up, all they're thinking about is just the weight, we're going to have real problems. And the strength coach isn't doing their job to help keep them safe and working it. It doesn't mean it's, safe. We want to be nice and easy and go light and do that. heavy's relative. We've got some of our kids that are squatting with 225, some of them with 415. But again, it just depends on where they're at. As long as they can do it in good form and get that body position, that's the key to it. So those are good. So I think, when he talks about in the wall squat, I think it's important that get yourself up in front of that wall. And all they're doing, like when Bobby's trying to do this, we just have a pole here, but anywhere you're in this position, you get them up close to that, have them see if they can squat. Most of the time, the athletes are going to bang either their head or their knee into that wall, which tells you their body positioning, and they're not aligned where they need to be on that. So it's just a great, easy test to feel where they're at and move. So that's what he's talking about with that wall squat, is not leaning against it. We're not squatting, sliding up and down the wall, but getting us into that position to move is key to help keeping them going.
A good one. It gets you to, especially if you get a lot of athletes off the bat, that right when they squat, there are a lot of the knees shoot straight forward when they squat and sink, and they just can't get the concept. When they step up to the wall, their knees are going to hit, so they're going to feel it, and they're going to have to realize, okay, how do I get down there? It allows them to problem solve a little bit. How do I get down there without hitting my knees? Okay, I got to open up my hips. Then I start to see if they're real tight. If they're real tight, we can work through. Another one we do in some of our warm-ups is a squat and reach. So I can have them grab onto their toes right here for a reach, for a stretch, but then they can pull themselves down. So if you notice, when I pull, my arms are on the inside of my knees. I'm pulling my chest through, trying to be as straight as possible. Reach, stretch. Now, side note for that, I also like it for the deadlifts, the trap bar deadlifts, because it allows them to understand how to pull themselves into position. But outside of that, for the squat, it gets them to really open up their hips, stay tall as they sink. I got some kids that look kind of funky and awkward when they get down there. They just can't get there. They're rounded over. They're barely getting down. Those kids, I'll just tell, if you can't pull yourself down there and you can just kind of hang out down here, try to do that for a period of time to where you can start to sink upright and kind of wedge yourself in and drive your knees out a little bit, whether it's 20 seconds, then 30, then a minute, then a couple minutes. Just try to loosen and open that area up.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and those are good. Now, do they all have to squat the same? Because, I'm thinking about is we've got our wrestlers in football and basketball and volleyball, all the different sports, and we have heights anywhere from 5 foot to 6, 7. And some of them just mechanically have a tough time, or they'll come in saying, well, I can't squat because I'm too tall, or I can't do this. What do you do with those guys as you're going through it? Number one, obviously we test them and see what they do rather than taking the word they can't do it. Let's find out why and what's going on. Is there a structural problem with their spine? Is it just mechanically they don't have the correct form? Do they all have to do back squats, or what kind of variations do you use?
No, and sometimes that's easy. If they're real kind of awkward about the back squat because they don't feel comfortable or confident in it, maybe we'll just throw them into a front squat. Because a lot of people, when you throw them in the front squat, they don't have to externally rotate or have that mobility in the upper back. So that eliminates one thing. They can load up here or here, clean grip, and they can just start to sit and sink. You'll notice some tall kids can really, especially my basketball players, a lot of them can get a lot more depth when they sit through there and they just feel a lot more comfortable. Now, that said, if we are trying to use the back squat to load the backside, the glutes, the hamstrings a little bit more, the posterior chain, then we're just going to try to work them in a position. And I've had some tall kids, some linemen, that have been working on depth. They squat very high, and it's okay for certain things and what you're going through, but I had more of a goal in the off season of getting them more mobility and some strength, because they need to be able to move well. And sometimes those linemen get into some awkward low positions to start and some of that. So I'm not saying it's perfect for all the time, but I think you need to be mobile enough to get there. So as we're going through, I'll set them up at catch racks. We'll use these. We'll set them up to height they feel comfortable. I'll kind of see where they're at, and then I'll pull it down one, and then they can try to work to that for a little bit, put a little bit more weight on, and then we'll pull it down one more or so like that. So we'll go a couple notches. I really just want them in between half squat and a parallel, and when I say parallel, I mean more of the hamstrings parallel to the ground, not the thighs dropping way down. So that's a little bit more of my mindset.
Well, and I think, what's key is we have some of them that think we have to squat to a certain point, have to do this or what. Well, if you've got that athlete that just has a difficult time, they don't have the mobility, and you're going to work an entire semester on just getting the squat in rather than working some strength as well. We work mobility and our speed and our strength work and all the stuff outside and the power work. Find your time, but they do it on a daily basis. until they can get the mechanics down. But that doesn't mean we can't squat until we get their mobility there. We just may do something different. The front squats or doing a trap bar, or like Bobby said, we take these catch racks that are out there, whether they're in your cage or outside extended, but get them to a point where they can get comfortable where they're working it. Because some of them get to a point, boy, they start dipping or they can't move, and we can't get down to this point. But if we can get them in that position where they get normal, their squats, great, and then they're hitting that catch rack at that point, that's great. They're comfortable, they'll gain it. Then we start working it down a couple of inches at a time until they can get that good squat that we need. But meanwhile, we can work the progressive, the heavier strength on the other exercises, so we don't just wait until they finally get to the right position and then we move up. So we're working it in the back, behind the scenes a little bit. But when we're doing our speed or agility work, reaction, the power, the jumping, the boxes, all of those, and getting them in that position. And a lot of them will find like that. They've got daily homework. Here's what you need to do. Here's where you're doing your squats against the wall, or your mobility for the ankle, flat, and you're rolling the knee forward to see, depending on what they need, that's your homework. And we're checking them weekly, how they're progressing. And if they're not getting better on it, we know they're not doing the homework. And then that's when we have the discussion a little bit more with them, or make sure it gets to the parents or the coach and say, look, your football coach or your volleyball or whatever, hey, here's what we've seen, here's what we're doing, and it's just not doing. So somebody else on the outside realizing, oh crap, I better start doing it. You find a way to make it happen. You don't want to find out later they tore something because they weren't doing their homework and you didn't find a way to help them, reach that goal too. I don't want to wait and hurt but say, yeah, I told you so. No, that's not it. You find that way, or the person, like the parents been talking to the kids all the time. We hear it all the time and we've been telling them that, as parents, about what they need to eat and how often. But they go to your camp and they get done with it. Now they're telling us, oh, by the way, I need to eat this or that. And the parents are like, yeah, that's what you've heard that somewhere before. But it doesn't matter. Somebody else saying it, it clicks. Whoever it is, be that voice and find the way to help them understand that they need to before they get hurt.
I think that's a great point there too. We're after better movement here. We're not after power lifters, so that's a different situation. With that said, also with the squat, we got to realize that sometimes we only have so much time. So maybe we can't work on hammering away mobility. It doesn't mean we're not going to work on it. We're going to work on the mobility and all that going on. But maybe I have a kid that, as they're working on ankle mobility, all that stuff, maybe I am throwing a little plate under their heels. That way they can still squat, they can get some load on. Because I've had a couple people that have some terrible pain just because they have no ankle mobility and they just can't squat or different things like that. Or some people that it feels great and they're able to load it up more, then that's fine. But we've got to make sure that we're actually addressing the issue. We're not just kind of tucking it under a rug and just going about our normal day-to-day. Also, on top of that, we got to realize that a lot of coaches in a lot of different sports use different variations of the squat, whether it's a parallel, half squat, quarter squat. A lot of research going on that it helps specifically with 10, 20, 40-yard dash, your vertical jump, a lot of those things, because you're loading in the specific movement that you're going to be doing. So we got to realize that those aren't bad. We got to have context and we got to know when to use them. And with that said, if I have a kid that doesn't have mobility, I'm not going to, especially if we have a summer camp and that's it, I'm going to still work on that and see if we can get them lower. But I'm going to probably still end up loading them up so they get the strength and the power benefit. The body does not know, your mind, your central nervous system does not know what depth you're going, but it does know and understand load. Okay, it's a stimulus. So if I'm getting a heavy load on, okay, then I'm going to get that stimulus. If I lighten it up and go lower, okay, there's not that same fatigue or load on the central nervous system. So there is benefit, and we got to realize that doesn't mean we forget about it. We still attack the situation, make sure they're moving well in that position, and then we start to hammer it. Maybe we put it as an accessory movement, like when they cool down at the end of the day, or for their warm-ups, just bar, and they're trying to get as low as they can, or with a little bit of weight on it, trying to sit and sink a little bit, because they still need to learn how to organize and strengthen some of those little muscles that you get from going a little bit lower. So.
And all falls into, just like Bobby said, with putting a plate under the heel or something. Again, we don't. That way, we allow them to still work the strength and the movement, but we make sure they have the additional things to work mobility as well. Because again, if we wait until they can go flat and get everything into it before we start loading them, then we're going to be in trouble too. So understand, yes, it's this. Bob doesn't like to do that. However, if we do that, we can do the lift. But then you better be doing the extra work as well. So we're progressing. Eventually, we can get rid of that plate. But to say we can't load and can't get them strong until they can do that, you're wasting a ton of time. and not doing any benefit for the athlete at all. So I think one of the things, and we're finally getting into the squat now, what we're talking about is, our big thing is, in the racks, and this bugs me. I see, when we do clinics and coaches stuff, where I pop into schools to look at different things, they've got these squat racks and they've got these catch racks that are in there, whether they're inside or the extended piece. You go out there, use them. Your primary thing you're looking for, and again, it may be because of the depth you're going, and you're going to load even heavier because now I'm doing half squats. It allows me to use heavier weights and more stuff. Well, you don't want to get to that point and then they collapse, and this thing is met way down here by their knees. So when they do that squat, they go down, and they can't collapse until they get down about 12 inches off the floor. You're going to destroy them. So I do this for two main reasons. One, obviously, to help them in the spot to keep them safe. But I do it. We teach our athletes. So as they're in there squatting, that athlete that's spotting, my job here as a spotter is not to then catch him and bring him back up, and that's it. That's what these racks here are for. You've got to get them set. So we generally set these up about hip level for him. So when he goes into his squat, he drops down. My job as a spotter is to see what's going on with the feet and the hips and the knees. So as he squats down, we can see he comes on down. He's in a good position. If he happens to collapse, the rack's going to catch it and he's fine and he goes into it. But I'm looking for, in that heel, if I'm looking from behind, I can't see where that knee, if it's rolling in or not, but I can sure see if that heel comes up, that means that knee is shooting forward. If that outside of the foot rolls in, so that little toe side of the foot comes off, that knee's rolling to the inside. So I can say, hey, get your right knee out, because I can tell already that it's rolling in. Or get your butt back, weight on the heel so you can flatten it out a little bit more. So my job is to help them at the maximum form do it the right way so that they're healthy, and then we can fix it. And it does two things. One, it helps you as a coach watching all these kids, because now you've got many coaches around helping. And at the same time, how much better is my form going to be as a spotter? If I'm paying attention to all that, I'll feel if the weight comes off the outside of the foot. I know what's going on. I can fix it myself. And that's what we want, is these kids learning how to functionally move, be strong and healthy, and get them into play.
Yeah, and I think that's huge, especially with kids. Sometimes they'll have the opportunities when they're going to say, it's okay that they did that. It's not a big deal. We'll get better on the next one. It's like, well, they can get better on that one. And you got to realize, if you're holding them accountable and you're coaching every rep, that's been a big thing going on with my football recently, is we got a lot of very young and we got some older that we don't have the opportunity not to coach them up on every rep. They got to learn, and they have to learn fast. So if we allow them to do it wrong, we're not helping them, we're actually hurting them. So they started to realize that. They started to coach them up, and it creates accountability. And then it also makes sure the older guys, that when they step in, that they're doing exactly what they're telling the young ones. So some of them learn, I'm not. So they've kind of bit the bullet a little bit, realized, and now they're starting to get better. So it's a great thing, especially when you have a lot of kids, and like Red Mountain, and like I've had recently in my smaller room, is that it has to be structured. It has to be organized. And these kids have to be coaching each other up, and they have to be better movers, and they have to become teachers of it. And if you can do that, it allows me, I can still control the whistle, control the room, and I can still walk around and coach people or give the leaders in that group some tips to help the younger ones. But then it allows me to relax a little bit, because I can't have eyes on every single person at once. It's just not possible. So now if I can get these kids to coach them up in each and every group, now they're getting context of what I would be saying to them. So it's huge. And they understand movement a little bit better than.
And that way, intensity picks up. The kids are working harder. They're getting on there. They're doing it right. And then they understand why now. Maybe I used to have a back problem when I squatted, or my knees hurt, or my neck hurts. And, the neck, where do they put the bar? That's the other issue. You get kids saying, well, I can't squat because it just hurts my neck. And, well, find that spot. So what are the things you're looking for on that?
A lot of times, if it's hurting their neck right off the bat, they're putting the bar directly on their spine. They have to realize that when they shrug their shoulders up, that bar should sit right along their shoulder blades. So if Bob was to shrug up right here and to get tight, okay, I would lay that bar right across the meat of the traps and the shoulder blade right here. Once I set that bar, you'll notice I have a space to slide my finger through, okay, and that's where the spine is. So your muscles, you're really creating a shell for your spine to protect it right there. So if we're way up here, that's no good. We want to be down here, kind of on the back. So just have to understand where to put it first. And sometimes I've had some kids that are pretty far off as far as muscle development goes. Even putting it there, it just hurts. Well, that's just a part of it. We got to grow a little bit, got to get a little meat. That area will become a little more callous to get used to it, but it's not going to feel great at first always. So, but we have to learn how to shrug and load a little bit better.
And in saying that, we have some of these coaches won't allow them to put a pad on the bar or won't do anything at all. And you decide what you want to do on that. My only feeling on that is I've got some of these younger kids that really, they don't have much in the way of traps or really small, not much muscle. So when they get that zone back there really isn't a ledge. I'm okay with putting a pad on until they develop inside, because if they're not able to load much on the bar because it just hurts up into here, they're not going to be able to load and gain the strength I'm after. So if I need to put a pad on to allow them to do that, because now all of a sudden I can put another 40 pounds on it, 50 pounds, because it doesn't hurt their spine. It's not on it. Because again, those little guys, they get those arms up there and you think they just never had a trap or anything up in there. There's just no muscle. So give them the pad to work with it, but work them away from it is fine. But if they're hurt, all they're thinking about is my neck hurts, there's no way they're going to give maximum effort on the squat that we need to gain that strength in the legs and the butt. So, figure that out. And again, that's up to the coach and what they do. But if they're limited and they can't go down beyond that because of that, put the pad on, load them up, allow them to work. So you kind of decide what you want to do on that one. What are some other things you want to get going on the?
So I think going through, after we think about that, setting the bar, we want to think about getting the upper back and your total body engaged with the lift. So once I lift and get that bar up, I'm trying to think about breaking that bar around my body, or driving my elbows to the sides. Once I get that locked in, I'm going to think about flexing or keeping tight, taking my breath. Okay, and I want to think about if someone were to punch me, okay, I want to be able to flex and not have it hit my organs, my gut there. Okay, so I ever tell a kid, if I'm going to punch you in the stomach, what are you going to do? Oh, they're going to flex and lock down. I want that same concept, that same feeling, so we develop that stiffness when we go and lift. Because a lot of people I see, or you hear their back hurts or different things like that. Well, you're not organizing your spine. You're not getting everything to do their job. If you get those muscles to tighten up and stiffen up, it becomes a shell, and it's kind of like bulletproof in your body. Especially we have kids like the box squat. Someone will go to sit to a box. They'll unroll at their lumbar spine, okay, down low, and different things like that. Well, we didn't keep the core stiff and locked down. Of course, if I sit and relax, now I'm going to unroll. But if I keep tight, now I'm not going to have that issue. But they just have to learn. So I know a lot of people get excited. They just jump under it and get it going, and that's awesome. But we got to understand how to slow it down in the setup. So I want to get hands even first of all, get my neck centered. Once I pull under, I'm going to step up. I'm going to break that bar around my body. I'm going to squeeze my core tight. Okay, now I'm going to take my steps. Now I'm going to make sure my feet are even. Okay, and feet, I'm not worried if you're parallel or straight ahead or anything like that. Okay, I think it's totally specific to what you want. Okay, I usually tell the kids to point their toes out just a little bit, rotate them out a little bit, so that way they can start to think as their feet as screws going to the ground or roots. Okay, we want to get them firm to the ground. If the feet are relaxed and they're not dug into the ground, then they're not going to have a great lift. So once we got that, get tight, screw the feet in the ground. Now I'm going to think about breaking at the hips and sitting back and behind and driving up. The big thing when I start to think about screwing my feet into the ground is you'll notice right off the bat, if I come over here and I try to pull the ground apart or screw my feet in the ground, whatever you want to think about, it gets my hips to rotate and lock. Now my glutes are working. Now my feet feel like they're literally roots in the ground there. So try that out, feel that out. But then it gets my whole body, it creates tension. If there's slack in my body, I'm not going to have a great lift. I'm going to have issues that are going to arise, just like movement and anything. So think about the setup and moving a little bit better throughout it.
Well, some of the questions we had too are what about box squats? Squatting on no box and back up and stuff. And there's pros and cons. We've used them at different levels. One helping teach going into it. We've had some that use it as a base to hit that spot and move into it. All they're really doing is we put that bar on the back and then squatting down to that box and coming up. Where I've always had problems with the box squat is if you don't teach the technique of how to land, how to get the hips back and move, you load that bar on. And the first time they're doing box squats, they've got their 180, 230, whatever it is on the bar, and they come down and hit that box. And as soon as they do that, their spine buckles, or they're pulling in through here. It'll destroy their back. So if anything, you get that box, you've got it set up, they land, get that soft movement where they need to be without it, or goblet squats using do it, any of that through there, got it on the side, whatever you're doing, but work with the bar and then slowly, but have them learn where that's at so they get that pause. We're working tempos to get them in. It helps them to get in that spot to move. But boy, if you haven't paid attention and done your homework originally and helped teach them how to squat, how to move, how to land and come up, anything compressing and they drop, it's going to be disastrous for the spine.
Yeah, and I usually, anymore, I'm starting to use more of the box squat in season, just because that rests at the hardest part of the position where the weight's unloaded. It takes a lot of stress off the body. But usually when we're doing it, I'm coaching them up to think about landing soft. I tell the kids in the group that if they hear them thump or they hear any noise when they hit, it's not a good lift. So they got to think about staying soft, staying tight, and then they're exploding up. So a lot of the times I used to start kids off a lot with the box, but now I started to get away from that and just getting in the bar. We'll do tempos or different things, and we'll start to work and understand how to use the brakes, how to use the legs a little bit better and going through. And with that said, that was great about the squats with the dumbbell or off to the side. And we got to think that when we're going through, we got to find ways to vary the squat. If we're getting real great at it, we got to find another way to stress it. And by that, I mean, in a game situation, not everything's going to be perfect and right. So we got to see in our accessory stuff or in our core conditioning stuff or whatever we're doing, maybe I'm going to throw a plate to the side of the body or a sandbag on one shoulder and I'm going to squat so it's offset. I got to learn how to stabilize and not let my body tip. Maybe I'm going to do a split stance squat where I'm very, very close together, not real long, or just different things like that. Or maybe I'm on a bar with a more advanced group and I have a bunch of fives that take 1 5 off one side and alternate through, so I have to stabilize.
And all those things are great. We talked about organizing the spine. That's the idea. We want to teach these kids how to be there. And it's not only just for the squat preparation, but it's movement on the field. We talk about controlling the melon every time they make contact. It's a soft. That soft means hips are back. We're not drilling straight leg into it. So it's soft. We come back in to make that contract and we explode back into position. So if we're not used to that and we haven't gained that strength the way we need to, and we're not organized and pulling, we're not going to be effective. We make that hard movement and come back into somebody. We're buckled in through here. He's going to drill me and I'm crushed. Doesn't matter if I'm just playing basketball or not. Crushed. I can't move. I can't get into position. So that's so important for them to get into. So finding that way, and that's where we do a lot with our younger guys. It may not be loading on the squat rack yet, but we can do that with sandbags and medicine balls or dumbbells or anything else to help get our younger athletes learning how to organize the spine, learning how to squat, learning how to get the hips back in the right position, exploding and moving the tempos. But when we talk about that box squat, my preference is using these racks on that side. If you're trying to get to a certain position, I'd rather them learn where the bar hits at to stop them rather than hitting here at the bottom and it crushes the spine. Here, if they go too deep and it hits, the weight goes off their spine. So you can use that to teach the same thing, and it's less equipment around too, things back and forth. But find what works for you and getting it in. Last thing, I think the big part, the main question is a lot is how deep do we have to squat? We've got coaches that are still out there will teach. And again, what you do, it's what you're after, but they think they've got to get butt to the heel. Some of them get parallel. Some of them don't know what parallel is. Is it the femur? Are they looking at the top of the thigh, the quads? Are they looking at the hamstring? What is that? Is it a half squat? Is it quarter squats? So it can change and vary depending on the athlete and what you're working with. We've shifted. I did a lot years ago from doing that full squat when we started taking a look at a lot of our players. How many times does that football player or that basketball player get into a position here on the field to do anything? And if our main focus is we always have to squat to here to come up, there's going to be a limit. It's going to be a lot tougher to gain on that strength. But if that same athlete can do 225 down into a nice full squat for me, but now I'm doing more of a half squat or just beyond where my ready athletic position is, just deeper. Now that same athlete, I can use 275, 295, and then that weight's going to progress even faster at that point, not having to go as deep, less variables. I'm building more strength, and then I combine that with my power stuff that we do. That's why our vertical jumps go so much faster and higher than other programs do, because we don't need them to go all the way to that. Now, there's points because of mobility and all. We'll take some of our squat sessions and we're going deeper. Or we've got some that we're going to do quarters, or some we do front squats, or some we do back squats, or some we do trap bar squats. I mean, just all different things. Because again, the athlete isn't doing the same thing all the time. You have to keep varying it. One thing I will say about your depth is if you're testing, test the same. If you always test at that half squat and you're looking for a right angle here at the knee, and again, a right angle at the knee is not parallel. Some will think parallel is right angle. Well, you look at that parallel way down here, I'm way beyond that 90 degrees at the knee. So figure out what your testing is so you can be consistent in saying, are they gaining strength or not?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think just understand all these different tools and different things and find a way to fit it into your system. Again, as we go through, we're going to have our little beliefs or little things. Question your beliefs. See if you're on the right page or if you're helping your athletes right. Don't get stuck in something just because that's what you think how it should be done or whatnot. You know, we got to separate and realize that athletic performance and this stuff, strength and conditioning, is different from powerlifting, Olympic lifting. So set your own standards and what you want. Be firm with testing and all that. But then outside of that, just test movement. You know, make sure they're efficient in a bunch of different realms.
And the kids get excited when they're not doing the same thing all the time, too. It helps keep the enthusiasm up and the intensity in that weight room. It helps keep everybody going or finding new things. That doesn't mean find some crazy thing on squat, single leg, standing on a medicine ball with a bar overhead and doing a squat because it looks cool. And you're going to just create some new problems. But, you know, make sure there's a purpose in what you're trying to accomplish and ask, is that what you're really doing? So, any more stuff on the squat? Well, we're going to do a lot more lifts since we covered a lot of that. So there's a lot of stuff. And then, you know, those are the questions that we get on a consistent basis. We've got what I'd like you guys to do is let me know, you know, some of the comments below or some of the, you know, Facebook page or wherever you're seeing this stuff. What do you do at school? Do they have you squat to a certain level? How is it? Do you have any problems with hips or knees, or what kind of things can we do to help maybe get some pointers on how to fix that? Like I said, if you're the list, the last place you should be hurt is in the weight room, you know, and luckily with that, knock on wood, it's already going 29 years now, the Strength of America doing the programs. We haven't had anybody hurt in the weight room, and there shouldn't be, because we're structuring and get the program their ideas to make them stronger so they can handle the stress of sport. And so share it, like it, tag some athletes, teammates, things going in, but let us know about your squats. What kind of things do you do? What do you like? What do you don't like? What kind of things can we help to progress that strength, power, and your vertical stuff that you need for your speed? Let us know. We can do it. If you're not already subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button, but also the bell so you get notifications for all of our upcoming other videos that we do beyond just the podcast. And hopefully we'll see you at summer camp, because that's coming up in about 10 days by the time this is actually out. We start June 4th, 2 locations down in Chandler. Make sure you're signed up. Some of the classes are almost booked on that. So get in. If it is, we'll let you know some of the other times, so we'll get you in. But make sure you get in there pretty quick to get that done. And let's get strong, healthy, and learn how to eat. Get ready to go.
All right. Have a great one.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
See ya.